Welcome back to the Folker Lab podcast, part of the Folker Intelligence and Leadership Lab, where we talk intelligence, strategy, leadership, and discernment. If you're just joining, quick catch-up. In episode 1, we saw that a simple structured method, hypothesis testing, can help analysts beat pure gut feel. In episode 2, we invited AI into the shop and asked whether it helps us think or just help us be wrong faster. In episode 3, we weaponized the analyst mind with critical thinking, thanks in large part to the work my late friend and co-author Jay Fudenberg and I did on higher order thinking for Intel professionals. Today, in episode 4, we're getting tactical. This one is about everyday critical thinking habits you can actually use. Quick questions to ask yourself before you hit send. Simple ways to catch your own bias, and how to disagree in the SCIF without starting a small civil war. This is critical thinking with sleeves rolled up. Let's start with a confession. Most of us like the idea of being critical thinkers a lot more than we like the work of critical thinking. It sounds great on an OPR, demonstrates exceptional critical thinking. But on Tuesday afternoon, with 3 taskers, a chat window on fire, and someone asking for a quick sanity check that is not quick and may not be sane, what actually shows up is habit. So the question I want to answer today is, what are a few small, repeatable things you can do as an analyst that make you a little sharper every day without needing a sabbatical and a whiteboard? We'll hit 3 areas. Questions to ask yourself before you publish anything. Tricks for catching your own bias, and how to push back on bad analysis without making new enemies. Think of this as a pre-flight checklist for your brain. Before an email, a product, or a slide leaves your machine, take 30 seconds and run through these. First, what exactly am I answering? It sounds basic, but it's not. Are you answering the real question, or just the one in the tasker line? If the tasker says, will they attack? You might realize the better question is, what conditions would make an attack likely, and are we seeing those? Just naming the actual question in your head can instantly improve your product. Second, what am I assuming? Jay and I spent a lot of time on this in our article. Assumptions are where analysis quietly goes to die. Before you hit send, try to name 1 or 2 big assumptions you're leaning on. Maybe it's the regime prefers survival over prestige, or they don't want to risk U.S. casualties before their election. If you can't name any assumptions, that's a warning sign. You're probably swimming in them. Third, what would I need to see to change my mind? This one forces you to loosen your grip on your favorite hypothesis. Ask yourself, what report or event, if it showed up tomorrow, would make me reconsider this assessment? If the honest answer is nothing, you're not analyzing, you're campaigning. That question comes straight out of good critical thinking practice and bias mitigation work, Hewer and others, because it fights confirmation bias head on. Fourth, what's the strongest alternative explanation? Not the straw man, the Iron Man. If you're saying they're preparing for offensive action, the strongest alternative might be they're posturing for deterrence in domestic politics. Lay out in 1 sentence why a reasonable person could believe that. If you can't do it, either you haven't thought hard enough, or you might actually be right, but you don't know which unless you try. Fifth, if I were wrong, where would it likely be? Be specific. I might be overweighting this one human source, or I might be underestimating their appetite for risk because I personally think the move would be dumb. That's metacognition, noticing your own thinking. The research Jay drew on says this kind of self-monitoring is a huge part of how people become better thinkers over time. You can run those 5 questions in under a minute once you're used to them. Do that every day for 6 months, and you will not be the same analyst. All of us are biased. The goal is not to become an emotionless robot. That's what episode 2 was about. The goal is to know your tendencies and design little speed bumps for yourself. Let me give you 3 common traps and some simple counters. Confirmation bias is the obvious one. You like your first hypothesis, and suddenly the universe seems full of evidence that supports it. Hewer wrote an entire book about why we do this and how to fight it. One easy move, before you pull supporting evidence, force yourself to find at least one piece of disconfirming evidence, one thing that doesn't fit your story. If you can't find any, you might be looking too narrowly. Another trap is the availability heuristic. If you just finish working a coup scenario in one country, you start seeing coups everywhere. The last crisis sticks in your mind and colors the next one. To counter this, ask, am I reacting to this situation or to the last one that feels similar? Sometimes just naming it. This feels like last summer, but here's how it's different. Keeps you from copying and pasting your old assessment. Then there's anchoring. You hear an early estimate. Intel community assesses low probability of invasion, and everything you see afterward gets filtered through that lens, even if the facts change. One way to fight this is to do a quick clean sheet assessment now and then. Pretend you're a new analyst walking in cold today. Based only on the last 2 weeks of reporting, what would you think? Don't let the first number you heard 10 months ago run your life. On a really practical level, you can also keep a short list of my greatest hits on bias. Maybe you tend to trust certain sources too much. Assume adversaries are rational in the way you define rational. Or underestimate domestic politics because it bores you. Write those down somewhere so you'll regularly see them. When you're working an assessment, glance at that list and ask, is any of this showing up right now? You're not trying to erase your personality, you're just trying to keep it from steering the ship in the dark. Now for the fun part, pushing back on analysis in a way that improves the product instead of the blood pressure. Every Intel shop has 2 unofficial rules. Rule 1, we want critical thinking. Rule 2, please don't make meetings awkward. The trick is to disagree about ideas, not identities. Here are a few moves that help. First, attack the reasoning, not the person. Instead of, that's wrong, try, I'm having trouble following the step between this piece of reporting and this conclusion. Can you walk me through how you got there? 9 times out of 10, you're either going to see the logic you missed, or they're going to realize out loud that they skipped a step. Either way, the product gets better, and nobody has to fight over who's the smart one. Second, use questions as scalpels, not hammers. There's good research and some great writing in Intel literature about the value of a questioning culture. Analysts who routinely ask themselves and each other things like, what assumptions are we making here? Or what outcomes have we not considered? Create better judgments. Questions are less threatening than declarations. So instead of saying, you're ignoring domestic politics, try, how do domestic politics factor into this? What changes if we weight them more heavily? Third, separate we from it. Say, our assessment leans heavily on X assumption, not your assessment leans heavily on X assumption. Shift it from your baby is ugly to this process has a weak point. You're all on the same side, trying not to surprise the commander in a bad way. Fourth, invite the challenge in instead of springing it at the end. If you're leading a team, make it normal to say early on, okay, somebody play the role of how could this be wrong as we build this out. You've just deputized a devil's advocate or a mini red team and made dissent part of their job instead of a social risk. Hewer talks about devil's advocacy and red teaming as key ways to counter bias. This is the cheap daily version. And finally, pick your moments. Not every typo needs a Socratic dialogue. Save your social capital for the places that really matter. When an assumption is shaky, when a probability is misstated, when a key alternative is missing. If you challenge everything, people tune you out. If you challenge the right things, people start to listen for your voice when the stakes are high. The goal is not to become the office contrarian. The goal is to help the team think better, together, and still want to sit at the same table tomorrow. So what did we say today? Well, we turned be a critical thinker from a slogan into a few daily moves. 5 quick questions before you hit send. Some simple ways to catch your own bias before it bites you. And a few tricks for disagreeing in the SCIF without starting a minor insurgency. None of this requires permission, a new billet, or a PhD. It just requires you, tomorrow, on shift, to pause for 30 seconds and ask a better question of yourself or of the product in front of you. In the next episode, we're going to change gears and talk about strategy. As you grow in your career, how do you go from TTP development to strategy development? How do you design workflows, reviews, and even training so that strategic thinking isn't something you beg for at the end? It's something you get by default. We'll talk about strategy development in a way that aligns and unifies the diverse actions of your team while still enabling their autonomy. Hey, thanks for listening to the Fulker Lab podcast. If this episode gave you even one question you want to try out on your next product, share it with a fellow analyst. And maybe ask them right after they brief, okay, if we were wrong on anything today, where do you think it is?